All right, welcome to a brand new one wherein we invite startup founders, majorly around infrastructure engineering, early stage and growth stage startups. And we talk about how to build companies, why did you get started? And it kind of acts as a skeleton or a blueprint if you are a budding entrepreneur or something you want to get started and entrepreneurship, technology kind of fascinates you. Without further ado, I have the pleasure of welcoming founder of Terrateam, Malcolm. Malcolm, welcome to the show. Pleasure having you. Why don't you get started and talk us through about who you are? How did you choose to find Terrateam while working with companies like bioinformatics, aerospace, and a bunch of other companies? Over to you, Malcolm.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on. You mentioned a few things in my career there. I'm on the tech side. I've been a developer since I was in my teens, and a huge fulcrum or lever in my career was I got incredibly lucky when I was still in high school, and through friends of friends, a company was looking for a developer, but they didn't have a lot of money, so they hired me. Being a teenager, I didn't require a big salary, nor did I know how to negotiate one. But they were not super tech people, so they didn't care that much how things got done. And that gave me a lot of freedom to implement systems. I essentially rewrote the entire thing from PHP to Python myself. And that was just a really amazing experience, and very lucky as a 19-year-old getting the ability to do that. And a huge consequence of that was getting the confidence to be able to trust myself in building systems on my own, having done this so early. So after that, I went to college, and then after college, I worked for an investment bank for a little while, and that was around 2008. And that bank went under in 2008. But I'd already decided that banking wasn't really the future I wanted anyways. It just wasn't that interesting. There's a lot of process involved and stuff. If you're the type of person that really just wants to tackle a problem and go at it by yourself and get it done, an environment like that just wasn't very good for me. And I decided, and because of that, I sort of went in sort of a different direction where I thought, well, I didn't like this very business experience. I want to go back to school. So I went back to grad school, and I did that for something called bioinformatics. And bioinformatics is the intersection of biology and genetics and software development. So we're generating all this biological data these days. We can, for an incredibly low price at this point, we can take a sample of your tissue or blood and then sequence your entire genome and turn that into data and then process it. So you need to do all this really parallel high performance computing work on that. And so I went to grad school for that, learned mostly, if you're a software person, mostly involves learning a lot about biology. And that was really fun, and I loved it. And after that, though, again, I was like, well, maybe I don't want to do this. I don't know. I'm not a very good decision maker, I guess. So I decided what I really want to do is move to Europe. So I moved to Sweden for about 10 years. I worked for a few places there, a finance company called Klarna, and then Spotify. Everyone knows Spotify. Worked there for a while, and then I decided, well, I don't actually like working for another company. That's really not what I want right now. So I decided to start a consultancy. And I decided that it was a good time to use what I went to grad school for. So for a few years, I did consulting work around bioinformatics, software development, mostly taking the ideas that scientists have and then turning them into actual products. And then after a few years of doing that, I said, well, what I really want to do now is make my own thing. So my co-founder and I, who we've been friends for 20 years, we were both experiencing challenges in managing infrastructure. And we saw there were some options out there for managing infrastructure, but we thought, we can do this better. So that's where the idea for Terrateam came about. And so the idea of Terrateam is you have some infrastructure you want to change. And in our case, we chose to focus on Terraform, which is a CLI tool that is, you can kind of think of it as like Python, but for infrastructure. So you write code, and then the Terraform tool takes that code and turns it into a set of operations on your cloud services for how to turn that code into like a physically different world by spinning up machines and bringing down machines and creating services and all that. Focused on that. And the core of what Terrateam is doing, and it's in the name, is allowing teams to work with Terraform more efficiently.
All right. So from bioinformatics to graduating and then working in a bunch of financial organization to start working in consulting. I did not know that the rationale behind Terrateam was Terraform for infrastructure team. So that's where it came from. But tell us, are you folks YC? Are you into Y Combinator? Did you ever apply? Because a lot of startups seems to be going to that direction. Is that something true for a Terrateam as well?
No, we're actually pretty unique in the industry we're in that we are 100% bootstrapped. So I worked my job for a while, and my co-founder worked his job for a while until we started getting some revenue. And then we decided, okay, we can jump all the way into doing this completely. But we're entirely bootstrapped. We looked at, so we're entirely bootstrapped. And part of that is, one, we looked at what these services are doing, and we thought, well, they're complicated and they're powerful, but we have all this experience behind us. We think we can do that ourselves for now, and we can at least get to the point where we have a viable product ourselves. And then once we get a little bit more growth, maybe we can hire some more engineers, etc. But the other thing about that too is we wanted to be 100% accountable to our customers. We didn't want to have some other influence that said, well, you should do this because it might have this effect, or maybe like, you should really make it like create a moat where it's much harder for people to leave your system. We said, no, we want people to use the system because it solves their problem and it's very good at it, not because it's hard to leave us. And similar things along that, where we really just wanted our customers to drive what we were doing and not have pressure outside of that.
I think
So
plus you get
bootstrap,
a lot of control over what you're doing, and
yeah,
less external pressure, and you have full authority and authorization of how you're dealing with customers and what type of customers you kind of onboard. With that, yeah, please go ahead.
I don't know, yeah. The other thing too, and this is a big thing as well, is we wanted to build the thing and get it out there and people using it, and we didn't want to spend time, with pitch decks or trying to convince VCs what we had was a good idea. We just wanted to make it, and like we just had this thing inside of us that we needed to get out, and we didn't want to spend time with a lot of process around that. And we're probably a bit older than your average startup founder. We're in our 40s, so we created a life where we had a few safety nets so that we could do this.
Right. I think talking about safety net, there are a lot of safety net in your product as well with RBAC and all of that. So we'll get into that. Let's get into what Terrateam is. So Terrateam, what I could understand is an orchestration platform for companies who are using Terraform and GitHub, primarily for both of these. And what you were able to tell us more about it. Why did you build Terraform? You mentioned that there were a lot of competitors. We're going to get into that. But however, what did you feel that was missing in vanilla or CLI version of Terraform or open source version of Terraform, or the cloud was a little expensive, and that's why you started building Terrateam and you wanted to go very niche, start very niche?
Yeah. Yeah, so to go back to what the problem Terrateam actually solves is, if you think about how software development works, is back in the day, you would do software development on your laptop, and then you might send a patch to someone who has commit rights to the repository you're working with, and then they say yes or no and do it. Or you might just have a commit bit on that, and then you can just push the repository. But now we have things like GitHub, where the standard workflow is that someone creates a change and they make a pull request, and then so their team can collaborate with that, right? Their team can review it, they can suggest alterations, and you can enforce, thumbs up before it goes in. Terraform is developed, after GitHub. Like, these flows existed when Terraform was developed, but it is fundamentally a free, at the time when it was made, a free tool that was just a CLI, kind of like Git, where you would run it on your laptop. So there's no collaboration in there. Terrateam takes Terraform and turns it into a collaborative orchestration system, where the fundamental piece of how it works is through pull requests. So we have infrastructure as code, where you write your Terraform code, and then you make a pull request saying, here's the change I want to do. Terrateam picks up that change, runs what's called a plan on it, and then posts it back to your pull request. And then the rest of your team can say, okay, it's doing this, it's doing that, this is right, this is wrong, great, thumbs up, thumbs down. We can also do things like we say how much this change will cost you and what's the total cost of this repository over its lifetime. And we can also run security checks on it to say, well, this type of resource is forbidden, or you're only allowed to use this module version, etc. So we can do all these things just to make sure everyone is involved in the process, and there's automation there to make sure the automated things are being done, and then collaboration so the individuals can be part of that in review process. Now, we're not the only people doing this. The original one is probably from HashiCorp, which is Terraform Cloud, which does a fundamentally same thing, although we all have different takes on it, and there's other options out there as well. Now, our particular take here, though, is we are truly GitOps. We're true GitOps in that the configuration of your Terrateam system is 100% exactly what is in the repository, and your configuration of your system is versioned along with all of the code that you have. And all management of Terrateam is done through code and through pull requests. So there's no other system that needs to be configured in order to use Terrateam. There's no so other players in this space may have Terraform providers, which allow you to configure their system with your code. But in our case, your code is the configuration. And that has some really cool effects. The biggest one is, for example, multiple configurations of Terrateam can coexist, because as we process a pull request, for example, the configuration of that pull request is the configuration of the system when it processes that pull request, what's in that branch. So if you want to test out a configuration change, you just make a branch, run it. Does it do the thing you wanted? Yes or no? Great. Merge it and move on. Doesn't do the thing you wanted, there's no rollback process. There's no, I need to undo clicking around in a UI or anything like that. It's just delete the branch and that configuration's gone. And that is really a fundamental difference between us and everyone else. And then after that, we in this space, our essential objective is to run plans and applies for you, which a plan is to show you what would happen if you made this code change, and an apply is to perform that action if you made that code change.
Right. I really want to talk about the other competitors in the similar space as well. However, I come from similar background, and if Terrateam did not exist, in order to achieve all of these safety nets and everything, I can think around that I need a team of 3-4 senior level infrastructure or DevOps engineer, create the entire workflow through GitHub, or through shell script or whatever it is, and it'll not be even validated, because that's what Terrateam exists, that you don't have to go through the entire process of writing these logics from scratch, and you focus on still writing the Terraform code. On top of it, it'll take care of the RBAC and the underlying configuration which should exist, and it should be beyond just writing Terraform code and doing those checks on top of that as well.
Yeah. This space is called the Taco Space, which stands for Terraform or Tofu Automation Collaboration Software, which is a very difficult name to remember. And you're right. If you were doing this, let's say that you're like, okay, well, I want to do security checks on my Terraform code. Run this thing called OPA, which is what we depend on, which is an open source tool that lets you just say, all right, I don't think I need a Terrateam or anyone else in the space. I'm going to do it myself. So you might think, all right, well, I'm on GitHub. I can use GitHub Actions and run this. And that's entirely true. But the challenge comes in is the more functionality you need and the more complicated your repository, you end up effectively over time building a taco yourself.
Yeah.
And that's a real time sink effectively for a company. You're not doing the things that you should be doing. You're spending time building this thing that you can just get.
Yeah.
And well, and why can't you just use GitHub Actions? Well, there are certain things that Terrateam does where your CI/CD system, your orchestration system, needs to be aware of the semantics of Terraform for it to function properly. So an example is you can you can plan in parallel as much as you want. If you have a change and I have a change, we can plan, and we're changing the same things. We can plan those at the same time because it's just it's a speculation, right? If you apply this change, this is what's going to happen. But we can't apply that change at the same time because we're modifying the same things. So something like Terrateam says, I understand Terraform. I understand which things you can do at the same time, which things you can't. And I will allow those things at the same time, and I will stop those that otherwise can't be. But also it says, let's say, again, where you and I are working on a pull request on the same resources, that if we both have a plan, we planned at the same time, and then you apply, my plan is no longer valid. So even though everyone in the pull request has looked at my pull request and said, this looks good to me, now that you've applied it, it actually changes my plan. And Terrateam is smart enough to say, okay, by the way, this is not the correct plan. I'm going to replan for you and update your pull request to reflect that. And by the way, everyone else needs to review this again. And something like that is just not like GitHub Actions. You can do anything in it if you want to spend enough time, but you just get this with Terrateam. And so as a business, we provide a SaaS service as well as self-hosted, but also this week we open sourced the product. So anyone can download it, build it themselves, run it, and try it out on their own infrastructure entirely free.
That's amazing. What is the underlying technology you folks are using?
So to cover all of our system, because I think listeners might it's one thing to know the language, but let's go over the entire system. We run everything on Fly right now. We started in AWS, and then we switched over to Fly, and we're thinking of going back to AWS. Maybe not. Fly is really nice in that you just give it a Docker image and a little YAML, and it runs your whole infrastructure for you. So it's very simple. It's very important to us to stay simple. We're a small company. We want to be lean. So we don't follow trends. We don't follow what we would call fads. We make very informed decisions that may seem counterintuitive, but there's a logic there. For what Terrateam is implemented in is a language called OCaml, which has a small but robust following. The reason we chose OCaml is a few reasons. So I'm a big believer in that one of the biggest ways to make your developers effective is to let them use technologies that both solve the problem, but also they enjoy using. And I enjoy using OCaml. So the impact there is when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh, I have a bug I want to fix. Well, I get to do it in this language that I enjoy using day to day, and I feel very comfortable in, and I find it to be a pleasure. And that just mental element, I think, is 90% of what makes people productive in life, is just that they want to do something. So OCaml is that for me. It could be Go for somebody, or Python, or Perl, or PHP, or whatever. But I think that is really something, especially if you're a manager, you should think about what freedoms can I give my employees to let them freedom in decision making that will just make them more engaged and just enjoy doing their job better, that at the end of the day doesn't necessarily impact the business in a significant way. So language choice is obviously a big impact, and since we're a small team, I got to make that decision, but I'm sure there's plenty of smaller things out there that someone can do. The other
And what
thing
was the sorry?
Yeah, the other thing is I think that there's in reality fairly marginal difference between technology stack choices. So whether you choose MySQL or Postgres or Go or Python, the problems out there where those choices truly matter at the end of the day is probably pretty small. So on one hand, that makes me free to make decisions that might not be, a mainstream choice, but it's also keeps me from getting into Emacs versus Vim arguments online and trying to feel defensive about my choices, because I think that there's people are doing amazing things in languages that and technology stacks that I just personally don't want to work with. But you can do a lot in this industry, and it's part of it is about creative expression, and part of it is engineering, and part of it is business. So you have to balance all these things and make decisions that align with all those things.
What was the reason behind shifting from AWS to Fly? Was that the billing or lack of resources available I mean, AWS has tons of unwanted resources, but what was the main reason?
Yeah, it was driven in part by cost, because even for our small setup, which our tech stack is the backend we've written, and then a Postgres, and then for compute, the way your plan and applies happen is on GitHub Actions, so we don't have to manage any ephemeral compute layer. It also means your secrets stay on GitHub Actions, so we never see any secrets or anything like that. But even for our small setup back when we started, AWS was more expensive, more money than we wanted to spend, and we were small enough where we could hop around pretty easily to another option. And Fly was something like 1/10 of our monthly AWS bill. And we were so new, and we didn't have any customers. So we wanted to save every penny we could. Now, as we're growing, there's things that a company looking after larger clients has to consider. One thing is like SOC 2 compliance. And something like AWS just has a lot built in just to make that life much easier for you, very automated things for you. And a company like Fly, which has fantastic for a lot of options, doesn't have those built-in things. And we also understand the operations of our system a lot more, so we feel more comfortable going into AWS, and we have revenue. So something like automated SOC 2 compliance features is money we have to spend and are willing to spend.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think there would be a lot of time wherein you'll have to take these decisions of migrating from one platform to another based on the revenue scale and size of the team. So yeah, that'll keep on changing. All right, getting into in terms of adaptability, where do you think companies are implementing Terrateam? Somebody who is just getting started with writing infrastructure, which is typically startup or starting a new project within a mid-sized team, or somebody where the mess is already there. Terraform, GitHub Action is already there. Multiple people are working on it, and everybody is running their own plan, running their own Terraform code from pipeline and all that. Where do you think, what has generally been the trend where you had the chance to implement Terrateam at which stage? At the beginning, at the mid, or wherever it is?
Yeah, so like any company, really tried to we sort of started with, you're supposed to do these exercises when you start a company where you find your ideal customer profile and then you search out companies that match that. But when you start and you're new and you also don't have a business background, like we're both technical people, that is to some degree just wishful thinking. Like we wish our customers were like this, but you don't really know. And we didn't have a budget to do market research, something like that. So we made the thing that we would use, which is more of a developer focused experience. And so I would say that if you look at our customers, it's not a size or stage in life
Mhm.
for our customers. It's more of a how they look at solving their problems and what their workflows are. And so our customers tend to be people and companies that are very comfortable with a code focused, pull request focused workflow. And they gravitate towards us because Terrateam just slips into your workflow and we almost kind of become invisible. Like once you're set up, and you just make a pull request and you get the results back and you go, and you're never really interacting with an external piece of software. Now there are things that we have set up in our UI that you can do, like an audit trail, compliance things, or if you want to just find an old run on a particular branch, or when like a certain state file was modified, you can do that through our UI. But really, a lot of people just want to make their change, get it reviewed, and move on, like any old piece of code. And I think it's kind of, if you think about, like, imagine if you were writing Go code, and when you needed to do a Go pull request, you had to go switch to a Go centric piece of software to make that pull request, and then get it reviewed there, and go in and then merge it. And then you also have a lot of places have multiple languages, right? Like, of course, everyone has shell scripts. And so when you want to make a shell script pull request, you have to go to another piece of software and do that. Like that's just not a world developers want to live in. They want everything in one place and just everything to happen in the same flow. And Terrateam provides that for them. So if you're a company that wants that, then that's sort of that's the fit we have with you. And that is more of a mindset than a stage in your company's life.
Right. Do you see any resistance? I mean, is that a new way of working for the companies or the team who is adapting Terrateam, or they're already matured set of developers or engineer who welcomes a Terrateam and they're kind of enjoying it, or there's a bit of learning curve. By the look of it, it really looks like pretty easy to get started because technically you're not making a lot of changes. It's, as you mentioned, it's very invisible in the back end. You just make, but how it is taken up by these engineers who are, because I come from the similar background again, and I all I did was pushing the changes and making sure the pipeline is running. So something, those checks which is now done automatically by Terrateam, is that these users are pretty happy with, or there's still a learning curve? You're going to need to make sure that you spend a lot of time onboarding them, making sure that they understand the concept, and from a very developer engineering mindset, just not infrastructure engineering mindset.
Yeah, I think while we don't necessarily have this customer profile in the sense other than people they want to work in pull requests, we certainly do have different customers at different stages of their life. And so let's take customers that are first starting out using Terraform or OpenTofu. A lot of them they come to us because they realize that each developer running Terraform or OpenTofu on their laptop is just not how they can scale and grow. And they have very little infrastructure as code right now, so they want to both get into a system that's gonna enforce this workflow, and also they want advice on how to build their system out. So we offer them both of that. And if you are a new user who, not a user, but like you have a new infrastructure repository, if you know you're going to go with Terrateam, you can structure your repository in a way where we just auto discover everything and it just works. And almost you don't even need a configuration file. It's not 100% there, but it's pretty close. So that's really easy. If you're a larger company, though, where you have existing infrastructure, you know people should be doing this or already, like it should be centralized. Maybe you are in GitHub Actions and you realize now that you're at a scale where you need something that understands Terraform and OpenTofu a little bit more, or maybe you're switching from another vendor for different reasons. Then the setup is a little bit more time consuming as you need to configure our system to understand your repository more. But we have an incredibly expressive system where we have two ways this happens. One is it's just a YAML file that you describe what your layout is and what the connections are between things. And that is static, and you can just write it and it'll do that. The other one is we have this feature called Config Builder, where when we detect there might be a change to OpenTofu code, to your infrastructure code, we run a script and we say, here's what we think the configuration looks like. Please output JSON for the actual configuration. And then it's a script that runs in your repository's context inside a GitHub action. And then that spits out a whole config for us. And then we take that and we execute that. So you have a lot of functionality. If our config file doesn't express how you want to auto-discover things or how you want to express things, you can write a little script that does it and then gives us the JSON at the output. And then one thing that's really important to us is that you always know what the final configuration looks like when it's going to run. So we have a way for you to say, okay, on this branch, what would the configuration look like when all is said and done? So like when the configuration builder has run, we also have an indexer which understands how to find modules inside of your system, then who consumes those modules, and then the actual configuration there, and it combines all these things, and it says, okay, if you were to write this entire configuration by hand, here's what it would look like once we combine all that. So you can understand, okay, this is exactly what I want to happen, or this isn't.
Sounds fair. I mean, sounds very interesting. With that, Terrateam seems to be in a space where a lot of big players are there, Malcolm. Like, I would like to name them like Spacelift, Overmind, Control Monkey, Terramate. How do you kind of think of them? Where few of them are funded as well and very well funded. So how you folks? I mean, what is that USP which makes Terrateam really different? Or you think that there's enough space for each and every player to have their own set of customers, and the space is really big enough to have multiple players rather than just have few handful of funded companies?
Yeah, I think that's one really great thing about this space is pretty much. So, but there's the Mark Andreessen post from like 20 years ago at this point, I think, that is software is eating the world. And the point there was just every company needs software, even if you don't consider yourself a software company. And I think a corollary there is almost all those companies need infrastructure, and they need a place to run that software. And that might be as simple as a PaaS, platform as a service, where they can just upload something and go, or it might be they're actually spinning up EC2 instances or the equivalent in some cloud provider. But everyone needs that. And that means managing infrastructure right now is very manual, but as infrastructure as code expands and grows and it becomes a standard, more and more of these companies are going into using Terraform or Pulumi, anything like that. So the market is huge, and there is a lot of room. The pie is massive. There's a lot of room for players. Now, that being said, the great thing about that is that all of us, Spacelift, M0, there's Scalar out there, there's us. We all have these different perspectives we're taking on it. So, for example, Spacelift lets you run a whole lot of different tools, and it lets you run them over a whole lot of different platforms. They support GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, etc. Terrateam, on the other hand, we focus only on GitHub, and part of that is we want to reduce the amount of things you have to learn. So you mentioned RBAC before. So our RBAC is derived from your GitHub settings. So you don't have to configure it twice. You just specify for your repository, for example, you specify who can do what there, and then we derive what that means for how they can, what operations they can perform. You can always configure it to be different if you don't like the automatically derived one. but we're very integrated there. And then you have M0, which is very into being able to spin up ephemeral environments and having a lot. They're very environment focused, whereas we are very repository monorepo focused. Now we support multi-repos, but kind of the idea is every repo we look at and we say, okay, you have a bunch of directories in here. How do we consume these directories in a way, like how do we understand what the structure means and turn it into a batch of runs? Scalar, they're very into you should be able to do all your development locally, but every operations happens in a centralized location. And I think that's great. There's a lot of choice there. And so I mentioned OpenTofu a few times here. So for listeners that aren't aware, Terraform was originally an open source tool created by a company called HashiCorp. And then last year, they decided to change the license of Terraform such that no one could build a product that competed with HashiCorp using the tool that they compete with. So in this case, HashiCorp has a product called Terraform Cloud and Terraform Enterprise, and that does a very similar thing to what Terrateam and Spacelift do. So the result of that was, which is really amazing too, because we're all competitors. We all got together and worked together and said we're going to support and fund a fork of Terraform and build it and manage it. And that was about over a year ago at this point, and it's called OpenTofu, and it is like thriving, I would say. There's a lot of users. It is gaining, it is building a lot of features that previously were claimed couldn't be built in Terraform. But so the end result here is you have these two options, Terraform and OpenTofu, if you want to manage your infrastructure in using Terraform style code. But
I really wanted to ask that.
Good.
Sorry. No, sorry. I really wanted to ask that. What's your open take on OpenTofu? Is it really a genuine alternative to Terraform, or it's a very temporary trend in the ISC space? Because a lot of our listeners are DevOps engineer as well, and we want to make sure that there should be a clear communication whether they should be going with Terraform or OpenTofu, because few of them might just be getting started, so we don't want to leave them confused. So something very rigid and binary that, okay, going forward, this is the trend we are seeing, and you should definitely start putting focus or throttle onto this particular IC.
Yeah, so the great thing right now is that Terraform and OpenTofu don't have a lot of difference between them. So if you learn one, you pretty much know the other. Now, there are a little bit differences in terms of features, and we'll see how that difference, how much it diverges. I think there's a strong incentive that both of them stay very compatible for a long period of time. So if you are looking into getting into this, I personally recommend using OpenTofu. I think that it is getting a lot of features that are still backwards compatible with Terraform, but that the community has wanted for a long time. So I think you're going to get a lot of value out of that. But be aware that if you do, let's say you get hired at a company where you want to switch to Terraform, or that company uses Terraform, everything you've learned about OpenTofu will apply to your Terraform, and you might have to look up like a little bit of difference here and there, but 99% of what you know is gonna transfer. So I don't think as a practitioner you should worry too much about which one you learn, because you're gonna be able to jump back and forth between either.
Yeah, makes sense, because I think a lot of these commands conceptually they're still same, but I think you get a little more upper hand when it comes to open sourcing, doing a lot of contribution, and building something on top of OpenTofu, which Terraform doesn't allow you now.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, and I think as a practitioner, there's a few things you should consider in how you make your decision. So one is maybe you are searching for companies that you just know are going to use Terraform. So in that case, it's good to focus on that. You should definitely know the differences between the two, and again, the differences are very small, so you should know that. But if you are, if ideologically you're into open source, I think OpenTofu is the ideologically better choice because it is open. If if you're a company and you need to make a decision about which one of these tools to use, with Terraform now, your only choice for automation, unless you build it yourself, is to use HashiCorp, because they're the only company that can provide services around Terraform.
Right.
With OpenTofu, you have your pick of close to a dozen companies offering similar services. There's a lot of competition in that space. We're all like very aggressively fighting for who has the best experience. So you as a company get a lot of price choice, you get a lot of functionality choice, you get a lot of workflow choice, you get a lot of experience choice. So yes, I'm very biased in that I'm pro OpenTofu, but I also think as a user, the competition there in the long run is good for you. It's really good for you.
Talking about choice and a lot of alternatives, that takes my attention to right now. Terrateam is very focused on Terraform plus GitHub. What's your what's the vision for upcoming years? Do you plan to go to Pulumi, bunch of other IC tools as well, and do you plan to extend it to other GitOps or source code management? Sorry, source code management like Azure
Like GitLab.
DevOps, GitLab, and all of that. So does that do you get a lot of requests around it?
So when we were first starting out, we were taking any call we could, and we got more requests for supporting GitLab. We chose to, and for the foreseeable future, will stick to GitHub. And the main reason for that is we are very developer focused, and that's where developers are. They're on GitHub currently. We understand that leaves us out of certain pieces of the market, but we're okay with that. There's plenty on GitHub for a company with our goals, so we're okay with that. And now, in terms of other things we want to support, you can divide the infrastructure world up into two categories. One is the declarative infrastructure, which is where Pulumi and Terraform are. CDKs would be very similar. And then the other one is imperative infrastructure, and that's like Ansible, maybe Rundeck. We don't have any concrete plans, but we have talked about, where do we see the company in 5 years, longer? And for the most part, I think for declarative, we've chosen our tool, and I think we want to see where imperative infrastructure goes. And that way, we will provide a solid platform for doing both kind of infrastructure operations. But again, since we're a small company, we want to stay lean. We're really focusing on one until it's at a point that we want, and then we'll probably pick one other tool for the other side of things and focus on that, and then focus on markets so that overlaps. So we really want to stay focused on these specific tools to give those users a very high quality experience, specifically developers. So growth and expansion in that way is not really a focus of us right now. We're really trying to pin down this declarative experience on GitHub and Terraform, and then expand out more horizontally rather than, or I guess more vertically rather than horizontally. I don't know which direction you want to consider going to imperative infrastructure from there.
Well, I think that's really commendable, Malcolm, where most of these startups, looking after growth and running after more sales, more revenues, developing more features. It's really calm to see you folks staying very lean and I mean, you're very content at the moment what you're doing, and it looks like you really want to champion this space first before kind of replicating it for other tools and services as well, before you kind of think of building something beyond Terraform and GitHub.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head there. And there's so much to do in making a really great developer experience as well. One thing we've had on our plate for a while, and we just don't know how to execute on it yet, but we're still, so what we do is we'll write an idea down and just let it like brew in our head for a long time, like months, maybe even a year, something like that. And part of that is we just have so much we want to do. We might not get to it. It might not be a priority. And the other part is we know if something isn't urgent, it's better just to think about it for a while rather than implement something that may not be the right thing. So for example, in terms of making developer experience great, is we've been thinking about Terraform error messages can sometimes be very opaque and hard to understand. And we would love to take those, somehow take the code and the change and like maybe toss it through an LLM or something like that and get back like here's the understandable way to see that message based on what you have, and here's possibly what you can do about it.
I was waiting for
And
these golden words, AI and LLM.
yeah, we're not there yet, but partially because based on everything I've looked at, it's not magic, right? You do need to do a bunch of work to get high quality outputs, and we're not there yet, both in our understanding of that technology and in just the existing data sources we could use to train it with. But that's definitely like improving that experience around error messages, because like if you think about when you're working on a project, what's the thing that like adds days to a project, right? It's usually not that I know how to solve this thing and I'm just spending a lot of time typing on my keyboard. It's that something weird happened or it's not working how you expect it, and you just go on this rabbit hole of trying to figure out that actually you should have used .to instead of .from somewhere, or like something ridiculous like that, right? That's really hard to see because you're so in it. You're looking at this, trying to solve this one thing. You just forgot that you just made one small mistake. So that's something where obviously technology can help a lot and hopefully leading you in the right direction. But we also don't want to lead people in a completely wrong direction, and that's why we're hesitant to jump into something like that.
Right, right, makes sense. Um, uh, how do you manage to? So I think it's a very lean team, right? It's a two, if I'm not wrong, two people company where a rich experience of software development, infrastructure. How do you like? What's generally your approach towards sales, support, a lot of things towards marketing? Yeah, I would really eager to understand how do you kind of thinking out of the box, and then less of software dev, more around prospecting, leads, nurturing those leads, sales funnel. Who does that? Is it you or your co-founder, or it's mix of both of you? Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a mix. So you're right, we are two people. That being said, though, we do outsource certain things that usually it's things that we know pretty much what we want, but we don't necessarily have the time to execute on it. So we can get it back and review it and say this is the right thing. I mean, like you and I have a relationship through this sort of work. So we do outsource things. So it's not just a small two-person company. It's a two-person company with sort of a network around it, which is also a pretty amazing thing. You think about like how like a lot of people talk about how we have cloud services here, and that has revolutionized making a startup, which is true. But then you have just all these niche companies that can do these other pieces of your business for you in and that is almost like cloud services for humans, and it's fantastic. We're at a point where you have the access to all of that. Like there's enough market there for all that to exist. I So our roles are my co-founder is more operational, and then I'm more technology side. However, as a small company, everyone has to always be selling. And one thing that I think that we feel a difference on when we talk to customers that end up signing is because both of us are so technical, we can just really have these deep developer-centric conversations with them, and we spend a lot of time understanding what their needs are and what they're doing, and that's very relatable. It's not like a salesperson where we're trying to they don't really understand the tooling and all that, and they might be more focused on trying to make a sale. For us, we really understand the technology stack we have. We understand the technology our customers are using, and we also don't want unhappy customers because that just makes more time for us, and we want customers that are happy where they are. So a great actual source of customers for us, of course, for prospecting is Reddit. And So Reddit's, you have to be really careful, because if you vendor spam, people don't like that. Justly so. Like, nobody just wants to have a vendor come in every thread and say, "Hey, buy us," etc. But the people who have come to us from Reddit, one thing they point out is that how I speak on Reddit is, look, here's what you're trying to solve. Disclaimer: I work for a company that solves this problem, and we solve it in this way. But if you don't want to solve it in that way, here's all the options out there. So I want you to know, if this is how we do it, and if that's right for you, come talk to us, or don't, or get our open source version and run it yourself. Do whatever you want. But here's just the ecosystem. And that builds trust, because people understand that we're not just traditionally trying to say, get people to use us no matter what. We want people to be choosing the right things for them. And that comes, getting people to use the right tools for us comes before people choosing to use us.
Right.
And that's how you build
That's
trust with people.
very organic way of selling things, indirect selling. Is that something you learned over communicating or being too much active on Reddit, or that something you kind of discovered, or that's modern day sales technique?
I think it actually is becoming more of a sales technique for me. I don't have a sales background at all, and that for me came from just how I understood I like to purchase software. I want to just know what's out there, and so I'm the type of person that looks up reviews, and I'll try a few things. I'll just pick the first thing I come by, and finding reviews where you can just tell the person is being genuine with you and giving all the options. Like, I'm sure we've all searched for something on the internet and found a list from a website providing a service, and somehow that list always ends up with why their service is the best. And then you use it, and you're like, well, that didn't actually match up to what the reality is. So I think it's just genuinely how I like to talk to people, and how I like people to talk to me. And you get what you give, right? So if you're honest with people, informal with them, and you explain where you are, where they could be, where they should be, then you get people being genuine back with you.
Yep. Yep. No, I think I strongly feel that newer way of businesses needs newer technique and ways of selling things, and I think that's the most easiest and convenient way of doing it. We at Infrasity does a lot of these very organic conversation. You don't come to us, but if you want the content to be like this, we help you like that. And if you want to go with the other vendors, partners, we're happy to do that. But this is how we would solve the problem. So I think my takeaway generally is that newer businesses need newer skill set and tips and tricks to get more customers, acquire more customers.
Yeah, and I do think the public is not dumb, right? Like, they can pick up on when you're being sincere about it and when you're
Yeah.
doing it in a fake way. There's just
Yeah.
little giveaways, right? Where you like, I've read it on Reddit posts where people, they're trying to do the genuine thing, but you can just see every sentence is driving the reader back to their thing, and you can just see they get downvoted like crazy.
Right.
Um,
Right. Right. Right.
but this is also the freedom that us being bootstrapped gives us. We don't have to make a 10x return to someone giving us several $1 million, right? So we can focus on trying to give the right customers the right experience, and not trying to be everything to anyone, or trying to trick someone into using us.
But Malcolm, if you were given a couple of millions of dollars, where would you spend those money if you were given it
Oh, a
again?
couple million. I don't
I
even
mean, okay,
I can figure out what I
let
would
X
do with like
amount.
100,000.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe 100,000 or 200K. Yeah.
So all right, so absolutely part of that money would go to finding an engineer or two. And that is would be a hard task, in the sense that we want to find someone that is really compatible with a small team, right? Like, you
Right.
need someone that you get along with personally very well.
Right.
And not in like let's be friends, but someone you can resolve conflict well with very successfully. So let me give an example. Like I said, we're open source, and that was a very long discussion with my co-founder and I, and it's probably the most like heated we've ever gotten about making a decision. We just had these two different perspectives we're coming at it from, and we weren't aligning on it. But we value coming to a decision in such a way that even though we were having all these conflicts, we were able to step back and say, all right, let's come back and agree on how we want to make a decision, and then take the inputs into that and come up with one. And let's do our best to just like relax a bit and stop getting heated. So like I for an example, I knew for me that I was getting to the point where an idea would be proposed and I would react to it because it wasn't like how I thought it should be, rather than saying like, okay, even if I don't think this is the right way to do it, does it actually fit better into how we want to accomplish things in the long run? And being small, that sort of conflict resolution is super important, because you need to be able to do things, you need to accomplish things as a company, and you're not every day is going to be, making this great thing together. And you don't want people to slowly feel like their ideas aren't being taken seriously, or they're always wrong in a discussion or something like that. So you really need to take those things into consideration when you're a small team, and then you're growing and you're growing from there. Other things we do with money is we have, one of the things our customers like is the quality of our documentation, but it can always be better. And here's an specific example. We want to do a lot more video content for how to accomplish things, both in OpenTofu and in Terrateam, because we know not everyone's a reader, right? That not everyone consumes the information that way. So we'll just want to see you do the thing and then match that over to whether they can visualize that a bit better. There's a lot of content like that.
That's definitely a business opportunity for us. I mean,
Yeah.
just kidding. Just
Good.
kidding.
We also want to help people migrate to OpenTofu more. So
Okay.
we think that there's an opportunity to just be the source of knowledge and support on migration, and making sure people are. So OpenTofu doesn't have a company behind it. It has a foundation, which is fantastic because it means you're guaranteed it's always going to be open. But it also makes it like a challenge. There is feeling comfortable that when there's a bug, it's going to get resolved, or that someone can help you work through that bug. So I think there's a big opportunity there to just help people feel more comfortable with OpenTofu. Now that probably gets me to like $250,000. So I don't know what to do with the other $9 million, but
All right. Yeah, I think the next one is, what's your general go-to-market strategy, Malcolm, with such a lean size, wherein your seems to be doing what needs to be done, what you folks are liking, and I'm sure behind your go-to-market strategy there must be something different. So you might be taking it experimenting it with maybe content, with maybe podcasts, something like this, or whatever it is you folks are doing. So tell us more about it.
and go-to-market is something we have struggled with a lot. Neither of us have a business background, and it's obviously it's if you're a business, go-to-market is fundamental, because there's this Mark Cuban quote where he says, "I've never seen a company go out of business because of too much sales, but plenty of them go out of business because of too few sales." So selling your product, as much as we love the open source world, we're still a business, so we need to stay in business somehow. And also, as you pointed out, we're small. So how do we make that happen without business experience and also being small? We don't have a huge budget for advertising, for example. So we have to take a different approach. And for us, what we ended up doing was we sat down and looked at our competitors. We just listed what we thought about them, what we thought their strategy was, etc. and then said, what are our strengths? And also, what are our strengths that we feel would be very difficult for them to replicate? And it could be something small. So, for example, how we interact with the Reddit community, I think, is a strength we have, where, again, we're very honest, like we talked about there. Being bootstrapped is a weakness if you look at it from one perspective, but if you change where you're standing, look at it, it's a strength because you can do certain things that you might not be able to do looking for investment. And our core audience is developers. We want that rich developer experience. So what we've gone with is focusing on making it as easy as possible for a developer to set up, install, use, try out, all that Terrateam. One angle of that is that we're open source. So you can say, like, for example, many companies, before you sign up for a SaaS service, you need to go through a security review or something like that. You need to get an okay. But you can just download Terrateam, run it on your desktop, try it out, see if it works for you. And if it does work for you, you can just, if the open source version has all the features that you want, you can just keep on using that and be happy for the rest of your life with that. Then we also have a few features in there that are paid features. So it's really an open core model. We try to be very distinguishing on which features are which, because we do really want to give those smaller developers who maybe just don't have a budget for a SaaS product, or just can only, they just want to run it themselves, like a good experience. So for example, we don't take away like the ability to like do any Terraform operation from the open source version. Most of it is around larger organization concerns that don't involve actually changing your infrastructure. So for example, RBAC is a feature where either you need to use our managed SaaS for that, or you need to buy an enterprise self-hosted license. So open source is really a big thing for us because we are so developer-centric. We think that is a great way to have a conversation with the developer. It's a great way for them to experiment and play around. And it's a great way for a community to grow around us as well. So we have that, and then from another prong in that is that we are so customer focused that customers really lead where the product goes. So there's no feature in Terrateam that a customer hasn't asked for. And our roadmap is public, even more so now that we open sourced earlier. But even when we were proprietary, we still had a public roadmap that people could vote on which features they wanted, and they could always ask for those features. So we have a like a customer product-led growth strategy there. And so far, that part is working. And of course, we also have a content marketing strategy as well. And that is a bit different from some of the other competitors in that some of them, and like, so Spacelift, I'll be honest, is amazing at this, in that if you want to Google how to do something in Terraform or OpenTofu, Spacelift probably has a blog post to do that for you. And I use those blog posts, to be honest, when I can't remember how to do something. So that's great. But we focus more on like more, less like, I'll call those blog posts kind of like tutorial style. I'd say we focus more on imparting knowledge to the reader, and they want to understand something a bit better. And we have content around helping them understand things better, or where certain technologies stand in the ecosystem. And then, of course, we have some content around, okay, well, if you want to do this, here's how you do it in Terrateam. It's easy. 1, 2, 3. So really like a heavy content marketing strategy as well. And heavy for us because, again, we're not like a huge company. So we really try to be focused on what's the things people want to learn about, and how can we help them learn those things, even if they don't choose to solve those problems on us.
How many customers have you got, Malcolm? Is that, I mean, are they all the same size? Are they mid-size or they enterprise? What is generally the trend you have seen were adopting Terrateam?
I'd say most of our customer base, let's say like 70% per of the number of customers are using like our mid-tier SaaS offering, which gives a lot of users, unlimited runs, unlimited concurrency, unlimited repos, etc. And then we actually have very few free users. Some people they install it, but then we have really high quality support that starts at the mid tier, and people jump on that pretty quickly once they start deciding they actually like it. So the free tier ends up mostly being trials. You can use as long as you want. It's totally free, but it ends up being a trial and practice. And then that other 30% is really like the enterprise people who might be doing self-hosted. Like any SaaS company, those are really like the bulk. That might be 30% of the customers, but it's a bulk of the revenue.
Okay. Cool. That takes me to the last one. If you were to build Terrateam today, what would you do different? What learnings would you take from your experiences? Or you were content with the way it's been built so far?
What would we do differently? So, the biggest thing in retrospect, there's I'm gonna say two. No, there's three big ones. One is we would have gone open source sooner. I think we didn't because we're a small company, and you're kind of afraid of going out of business when you're small. You're just like, if we give it away, will anyone use it? And it took us a long time to get to the maturity of being okay with that, and then understanding what that looked like. We definitely do that a lot sooner. The other one is we would start doing customer interviews much sooner. So we had growing customer base, and we just never talked to them except for support calls. And that was definitely a way we could have understood things a lot sooner, faster. Like, just talk to your customers. They are probably using it for reasons that you don't understand why they're using your thing. Like, you're building something in your head and you're like, oh, it solves this problem. And then you get a customer that's like, well, I use it because of this. And you're like, oh. So one side is you might understand where better to invest on improving things with that. And the other side is you might just understand different opportunities of how you should position yourself, or how to talk to people, or what group of people to go after if you see customers viewing your tool in a way that you thought was different. Finally, I would say we started this not, I don't want to say like not seriously, but in the sense of, it's this thing that, these two friends were working on together because they thought they could build a good tool. And that means we didn't necessarily do a lot of hard things that we should have done sooner. So like we would always talk about like we need to do some more blog posts, but we would just never pull the trigger on it because you could write a blog post or you could write a new feature, and the new feature is always going to be a lot more fun. So either personally executing on more of the hard things, or being more okay with going out to like talking to someone like you and saying like, here's the idea we want, can you execute on that for us, is something that we should have done a lot sooner.
Wonderful. I think, yeah, bang on. I think these are quite, I think my takeaway is like the second and the third one, obviously, the maximum touch points you can have with your customers. I kind of make sure that even if my customers are not talking, I'll make sure that I reach out to them, ask them how are they finding the product. So that's bang on. And I think, I think that's a great learning for most of the people watching on the podcast. Cool. That brings us to the end of the session. Yeah, sorry. You had something. Yep.
I was gonna say, yeah, and I think like for me being a tech person, it feels unnatural to reach out to a customer and it feels a little awkward, but I have to say every customer loves it. They love the attention of wanting to understand why they made the decision to use you more. They appreciate it.
Absolutely. Cool. I enjoyed the conversation, Malcolm. It was one of the best conversation I had in quite some time. Thank you for coming onto the show. For the folks who are just getting started with Terraform infrastructure, please go ahead and try Terrateam. The link is in the comment box, and then the team is super approachable. They have a Slack community as well. So if you have any questions, any issues running it, now it is open source as well. Go ahead and try things on your system and see the magic what Terrateams gives us. With that, Malcolm, I would like to wrap up, and thanks for coming on to the show. Hopefully, we'll speak soon, and good luck with the upcoming features and whatever you're building with Terrateam.
Thank you so much. It's been great being here. I hope you invite me on again.
Absolutely. Speak later. Thank you.